All right, let's unpack some of this and focus in on that bombshell case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The allegation by South Africa that Israel is engaged in genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Mark Kersten is my guest. He's an assistant professor of criminology, criminal justice at the University of the Fraser Valley. He's also a fellow at the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. That is based at Concordia University. Good to have you with us, Mark. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for covering this really important case.
Absolutely. So, your take on the significance of it. Let's start there, sort of broad strokes.
Yeah, hugely significant. It's not the only genocide case at the International Court of Justice. Ukraine has brought Russia over genocide to the International Court of Justice, and the tiny West African state of the Gambia has brought Myanmar over allegations of genocide to the International Court of Justice. But of course, given the context, given that this is the conflict in the Middle East, there's obviously much more attention to it. You know, watching the proceedings today outside of the International Court of Justice, there was a giant screen playing this and hundreds, if not thousands, of people watching it. I've never really seen that before in all my years of studying international law. It's not something that tends to have a big kind of almost festival atmosphere of people around watching on big screens. So clearly people are paying attention. And I think it'll be critically important, most importantly, not for Israel, not for Palestine, but for the very people who are trying to survive day to day in the Gaza Strip.
You know, making an allegation of genocide is one thing, but proving it can be very challenging, is my understanding. Can you explain what South Africa actually has to do in terms of the idea of intent, Mark? You know, to sort of figure out a way to prove that Israel is intentionally trying to commit genocide against the Palestinians?
You're absolutely right, Todd, that it's very hard to show genocidal intent. What South Africa has done is basically put together an application, and it'll continue to work on this, right? This isn't the end of the case, as you noted from the outset, but it's put together dozens of statements from Israeli officials, including the prime minister, the president, cabinet ministers, military officials, which it suggests together indicate a genocidal intent, or at the very least, incitement to violence against Palestinian civilians. And it's noted quite correctly that none of those individuals who have pronounced that they would like to see Gaza destroyed or nuked, or the people of Gaza forcibly displaced and permanently displaced, none of those people have been punished or prosecuted by the Israeli justice system. So that's what it's putting forward as its kind of pattern of genocidal intent. Whether or not the International Court of Justice finds that convincing remains to be seen. That's not where we're at right now in the case. But what I'd really encourage people to do who are following this case is not to get caught up just on the genocide word. Even if it's not genocide, even if it doesn't meet the threshold of genocide, the allegations put forward, the 10,000 children in Gaza who have been killed, the 10 Gazan children every day who lose at least one, if not both legs, the attacks that you showed on humanitarian aid workers, the attacks on hospitals, and so on, all of these things are extremely serious allegations. So whatever we call them, we must do better to, one, protect civilians from such harms, and two, to prosecute those individuals who and potentially hold states responsible that have been involved in these atrocities.
And what's Israel's take on this, Mark, and their counter argument to what South Africa is saying?
Yeah, quite a few, obviously. And one major plank that they put forward is, look, we are not the ones as Israel who has committed genocide. It was Hamas on October 7th that committed genocide. Now, the International Court of Justice, the way that it works is really that it's a court that can only deal with states effectively suing other states for breaches of international law. So South Africa is suing, in a sense, Israel for not complying with the Genocide Convention. That means that the International Court of Justice can't actually deal with Hamas's genocidal activities, which I agree are genocidal. I think that's very clear. But the International Criminal Court, another tribunal in The Hague, can do so. And if Israel really wants Hamas leaders to be prosecuted and punished for their genocidal acts, their war crimes, their crimes against humanity, their indiscriminate bombing of areas of Israel. Israel should stop attacking the International Criminal Court and attacking international law standards and cooperate with the ICC and submit evidence to the ICC. And again, I have no doubt whatsoever that investigators and prosecutors at the International Criminal Court would welcome cooperation from Israel in helping it to build cases against Hamas leaders.
South Africa has long been a staunch supporter of the Palestinians, and some people, Mark, may be wondering why they would get involved. But many in South Africa do compare what black South Africans went through during the apartheid era with what Palestinians have been going through for a number of years. How long do you think this case, realistically, is going to take? Are we talking about years?
Okay, so there's two really important things. What happened this week is really about provisional measures. What South Africa is basically asking is, look, this case may take months or years to finally get to the point where the judges determine whether or not genocide has or has not been committed. But in the meantime, what South Africa is asking for are what we call provisional measures or preliminary measures, which are basically orders that the court can make on Israel. And what South Africa has asked for is a stop, an end to the military operations in Gaza, which the court may or may not grant in the meantime. It's also asked for food and aid to get in, for a fact-finding mission to go in and study this question of genocide, etc. Those provisional measures, or the decision by the judges on those orders, I would expect in the next couple of weeks.
Mark, we really appreciate you taking the time today to join us here on CTV News. Share your thoughts about what's going on in The Hague and this case.
My pleasure. Again, thanks for covering this issue, and thanks for having me on, Todd.
Mark Kersten joining us from Vancouver.